This is Tony, and Tony is having the best 5 seconds of his life. He is behind a restricted government research building. There is a giant sign that says, "Authorized personnel only." Tony sees the sign, Tony sees his skateboard, and Tony makes the kind of decision that changes history. He pushes forward, he jumps, the skateboard spins under his feet. For one beautiful moment, Tony looks like a professional. Then his foot slips. The board shoots out from under him. It flies over a metal fence, bounces off a warning sign, smashes into a glowing electrical unit, and then, bzzz, every light in the building turns off. Then every street light turns off. Then every city turns off. Then every country turns off. In less than 1 minute, Tony has accidentally deleted electricity from Earth for 30 days. And the worst part? Tony looks at the smoking electrical unit and says, "Okay, that probably wasn't because of me." But it was, and what happened next would change the world forever. At first, people thought it was normal, a storm, a grid issue, maybe someone hit a pole. In Tony's neighborhood, everyone walked outside holding dead phones like sacred objects. One man kept tapping his screen harder and harder, as if the phone would apologize. A woman yelled, "My Wi-Fi is gone." Her husband said, "Relax, it's just the Wi-Fi." Then he tried to open his garage door. It didn't move. That was when people started getting nervous. Inside his house, Tony did what any responsible adult would do after possibly causing a global disaster. He opened the fridge. The light didn't turn on. He gasped, not because the world was collapsing, because his leftover pizza was in danger. Tony did not know that food in a fridge can start becoming unsafe after only a few hours without power. So he opened the fridge every 6 minutes to check if the food was still cold, which made it worse. By midnight, the city looked ancient. No traffic lights, no billboards, no glowing windows, just cars honking at intersections while drivers tried to remember how eye contact worked. Hospitals switched to backup generators, airports froze, elevators stopped between floors. In one apartment building, a man named Dennis was trapped on the 18th floor with 3 grocery bags and 1 live lobster. Nobody knew why he had a lobster, not even Dennis. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that this blackout wasn't local. It wasn't national. It was everywhere. New York, Tokyo, London, Bangkok, Dubai. Every city on Earth had gone dark at almost the exact same moment. And somewhere in the shadows, Tony was still pretending this was a coincidence. By sunrise, the world looked confused. People expected the power to come back. They waited. They refreshed phones with no signal. They flipped switches. They unplugged routers. They plugged them back in. Millions of people stared at dead screens and said the same sentence. Maybe it just needs a minute. It did not need a minute. It needed 30 days. Emergency radios began broadcasting strain updates. The outage was global. The cause was unknown. Power plants had stopped responding. Control systems had gone offline. And modern life started falling apart piece by piece. No card payments, no ATMs, no gas pumps, no supermarket scanners, no subway systems, no traffic control, no internet, no charging phones, no microwave burritos. This last one hit Tony especially hard. He stood in his kitchen holding a frozen burrito like it was a tragic historical artifact. Then he remembered something, the grill. Tony smiled. While governments were holding emergency meetings, while hospitals were rationing generator fuel, while satellites drifted silently overhead, Tony decided to host a barbecue. Because Tony was not a man of wisdom, he was a man of vibes. By noon, his backyard smelled like smoke, panic, and half-defrosted chicken. Neighbors arrived carrying everything from their dying fridges: steaks, ice cream, fish sticks.
A birthday cake. One guy brought 14 pounds of shrimp and said, "We either eat it now or die trying." For 3 hours, it felt like a party. People laughed. Kids played outside. Nobody checked social media because nobody could. For a moment, the blackout felt almost peaceful. Then the water pressure dropped, and everyone stopped laughing. By day 3, the world had changed. Not dramatically, quietly. That was the scary part. The first thing people noticed was the smell. Garbage trucks weren't running normally. Food was rotting in stores. Freezers had failed. Restaurants dumped spoiled meat into alleys. In apartment buildings, hallways became dark caves. Without elevators, elderly people were trapped upstairs. Without pumps, some buildings lost running water. Without working sewage systems in certain areas, bathrooms became a crisis nobody wanted to talk about. Tony, meanwhile, had developed a survival strategy. It was called Ask Linda. Linda lived next door. Linda had batteries. Linda had canned food. Linda had a hand crank radio. Linda had apparently been preparing for the end of civilization since 2009. Tony knocked on her door holding a bag of melted ice cream. Linda opened it and sighed. "Tony, did you do something?" Tony laughed too loudly. What, me? No. Why would electricity listen to me? Linda stared at him. Behind Tony, the sky was full of silent helicopters. The government had found the research building. They had found the broken electrical unit. They had found the skateboard wheel melted into the control panel. And they had found security footage of Tony. Unfortunately, the footage stopped right before his face appeared. So now there was an international manhunt for unknown skateboard male. Tony saw the news bulletin on Linda's radio transcript. His face went pale. Linda looked at him. Tony looked at the floor. Then Tony said, "Could be any skateboard male." But nobody believed him. By day 7, cities stopped feeling like cities. They felt like camps. People cooked outside. Families slept together in living rooms. Neighborhoods formed watch groups. Candles became currency. Batteries became treasure. Gasoline became gold. The rich were suddenly less rich. The poor were suddenly more prepared. People who knew how to fix bicycles became local celebrities. People who knew how to grow food became royalty. People who only knew how to make PowerPoint presentations had a difficult week. Tony tried to help. He truly did. He joined a neighborhood supply team. His job was simple. Carry water, do not spill water. Tony spilled the water. Twice. Then he was reassigned to morale. This mostly meant telling children stories about how electricity would return soon. One little girl asked, "How do you know?" Tony said, "Because adults are working on it." She said, "You're an adult." Tony looked deeply offended. Meanwhile, across the world, emergency systems were cracking. Hospitals were running on limited backup power. Fuel deliveries were delayed. Ports were struggling. Trains were stopped. Food distribution was turning into a race against time. And at the center of it all was one impossible question. How do you restore a world that has gone completely dead? The answer was not easy, because power grids are not just giant light switches. They are massive, delicate systems. They have to be balanced. Too much demand at once can crash them again. Too little stability can cause cascading failures. And now every country was trying to rebuild from darkness. But there was another problem. The machine Tony hit had not simply shut things down. It had locked the global grid into a protective sleep mode. To restart electricity, someone needed to access the original unit, the same unit Tony destroyed, and there was only one person who knew exactly where the skateboard landed: Tony. By day 14, Tony had become a ghost. Posters appeared, not with his real name, just a blurry image from security footage, a hooded figure, one knee bent.
One arm extended, a skateboard flying heroically toward disaster. The caption read, "Do you know this man?" Tony wore sunglasses indoors after that. Linda told him this made him more suspicious. Tony said, "That's what they expect me to think." Linda said, "Tony, you are wearing sunglasses in a basement." The world outside was getting harsher. Some towns adapted quickly. They organized food lines. They shared wells. They used bicycles, horses, carts, anything that moved without electricity. Other places fell apart. Arguments turned into riots. Stores were emptied. Fuel depots were guarded. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some people believed the sun caused it. Some blamed aliens. Some blamed secret billionaires. One group blamed pigeons. Tony liked that theory. But every night, when the sky turned completely black, people saw something they had forgotten. Stars. Billions of them. With city lights gone, the Milky Way appeared over places where nobody had seen it in generations. People stood in the streets and looked up. For the first time in years, the world was quiet enough to hear itself breathe. And that made the next part even stranger, because on day 15, the stars began disappearing. Not all of them, just one patch of sky, then another, then another. Astronomers using old optical telescopes realized what was happening. Satellites were drifting. Some were failing. Some were losing orientation. The blackout had reached space. And that meant navigation, weather tracking, communications, and global timing systems could become unreliable. The darkness was climbing upward. Tony heard this on Linda's radio, then whispered, "I may have slightly overdone it." Linda slowly turned her head. Slightly? By day 21, Tony couldn't hide anymore. A child from the neighborhood found his skateboard deck in the bushes near the research building. It had Tony's name written underneath in black marker. Not just Tony, full name, phone number, and the words, "Return if awesome." Within hours, soldiers arrived. Tony tried to escape on a bicycle. The chain fell off after 12 feet, so he surrendered. They took him back to the facility. The building was dark, cold, silent. Inside, scientists stood around the ruined electrical unit like doctors around a very expensive patient. A general pointed at the melted control panel. "Did you do this?" Tony looked at the skateboard-shaped dent, then looked at the scientists, then at Linda, who had somehow come along because she refused to let Tony explain anything alone. Tony swallowed. "I was attempting a trick." The room went silent. One scientist removed his glasses. "You destroyed global electricity." Tony nodded. "With a trick?" Tony nodded again. The scientist leaned closer. "Did you land it?" Tony looked down. "No."
The scientist whispered, "Unbelievable." But then something unexpected happened. Tony noticed a small broken lever inside the machine. It was stuck under a crushed wheel bearing. The engineers had missed it because the whole panel was fried. Tony pointed. "That thing moved when my board hit it." A scientist blinked. "What thing?" "That little metal thingy." "Do not call it a thingy." But Tony was right. The machine had not been destroyed. It had been jammed. The skateboard wheel had locked the emergency isolation switch halfway between shutdown and restart. For 21 days, the entire planet had been trapped in one mechanical shrug. Fixing it would require someone to crawl into a narrow maintenance shaft and manually reset the switch. The shaft was too small for the engineers, too tight for the soldiers, too dangerous for almost everyone. Then everyone looked at Tony. Tony said, "I don't love where this is going." For 9 days, crews prepared the restart. Not all electricity would return at once. That would overload damaged systems. The world had to wake up slowly, region by region, grid by grid. Hospitals first, water systems, communications, food storage, transportation, homes last.
Tony trained for the shaft mission by doing absolutely nothing useful, then claiming he was saving energy. Linda packed him a flashlight, a wrench, and a note that said, "Do not touch anything unless told." At 7:43 p.m., exactly 30 days after the accident, Tony crawled into the machine. It was hot, tight, full of wires. Every engineer in the room shouted instructions through a radio. "Move forward. Stop. Do not kick that cable. Tony, why are you humming?" Tony reached the switch. It was stuck. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. Still nothing. Then he saw the problem. His melted skateboard wheel was wedged inside the mechanism. Tony stared at it. The object that ended the modern world. A tiny wheel. He grabbed the wrench, twisted. The wheel cracked loose. The switch snapped into place. For 1 second, nothing happened. Tony held his breath. The scientists held their breath. Linda closed her eyes. Then somewhere outside, a single light turned on. Then another. Then a street lamp. Then a hospital wing. Then an entire city block. Across the world, electricity returned like sunrise. People cheered. Machines woke up. Water pumps roared. Phones lit up with 30 days of missed notifications. And Tony, still stuck in the shaft, heard the whole world come back to life. He smiled. Then his phone buzzed. One message appeared. From an unknown number. It said, "Nice trick." Tony frowned. Because attached to the message was a video. A video from a security camera. Showing the full accident. Showing Tony's face. Showing everything. And below it was one final line. "Round 2? Tony whispered. "Oh no." Cut to black. For 30 days, humanity learned something terrifying. Electricity is not just lights. It is food, water, hospitals, money, communication, safety, civilization. And somehow, all of it was nearly defeated by one man, one skateboard, and one extremely bad decision. So the next time you see a sign that says, "Authorized personnel only," remember Tony. And maybe, just maybe, do not try to kickflip next to the machine that controls the world.